A group of men have been jailed for fatally shooting a young man in broad daylight near a children's playground in revenge for a robbery they mistakenly thought he had committed. Demetrius Kyriakou, who's 35 years old, of Islington, was jailed for life to serve a minimum of 31 years at the Old Bailey on Friday after previously being found guilty of the murder of 22-year-old Imaani Allaway Muir. Nathaniel Rees, who's 41, of Islington, who fired the gun, was also jailed for life to serve a minimum of 33 years and 2 months after he pleaded guilty to murder. Matthew Hardy, who's 36, of Islington, was jailed for 7.5 years, and Darren Dredge, who's 41, was jailed for 8.5 years for the manslaughter of Imaani after being found not guilty of murder. Hardy was given an additional 18-month sentence for conspiracy to supply Class B drugs. James Nicholson will be sentenced for manslaughter at a later date. Following the trial, Kyriakou was charged and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply Class A and B drugs and possession of criminal property, and Dredge to conspiracy to supply Class B drugs and possession of criminal property. They were also sentenced for these offences with the terms to run concurrently. Detective Chief Inspector Neil John from the Met Specialist Crime Command said Imaani was a young man who had his whole life ahead of him, but by simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time, he was tragically killed in a horrific act of violence that took place in broad daylight just meters away from the children's playground and a football pitch which was full of children. Kyriakou had refused the police's help after the robbery and decided to take the matters into his own hands, recruiting his friends to take part in his deadly revenge plan. The joint actions of these men resulted in the execution of Imaani, who paid with his life for a robbery he actually had no involvement in. We were determined to bring Imaani's killers to justice, and my team worked tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering overwhelming evidence to convict the 5 defendants. These men will now each serve a lengthy period behind bars for their cold and callous actions. There is never an excuse for violence, especially violence using an illegal firearm, and everyone in the Met remains committed to tackling violence in all its forms and removing dangerous weapons and those who carry them from the streets of London. So, previously the court had heard, shortly after 12:30 on the 4th of July 2020, Kyriakou was robbed by 4 unknown men. Kyriakou suffered head injuries and had his Rolex watch, cash and iPhone stolen, and the suspects drove off in a black BMW. Officers attended the scene and spoke to Kyriakou, who was in his blue Range Rover, and he said he believed the suspects had a knife and he did not know them, but he did not wish to speak further about it. Following the robbery, arrangements were made for the defendants to meet at Hardy's home address in Islington, where Kyriakou was living at the time. At the flat, the defendants made inquiries to locate Kyriakou's stolen property by using the Find My iPhone app. Once they had the location, they drove to the area and encircled it. A loaded firearm was also collected en route. Kyriakou and Rees were the last to arrive in the area shortly before 3:30 in the afternoon. They got out of Kyriakou's blue Range Rover on Faraday Close and went down an alleyway where a group of people and the stolen property were located. Seconds later, Rees shot Imaani multiple times on Roman Way in N7. They then ran back to the Range Rover and the vehicles which had brought people to the scene from the 6 Acres Estate rendezvous. They left the area as quickly as possible. Nicholson later collected the gun from Rees and disposed of it, and it has not been recovered by the police. Officers, the London Ambulance Service and London's Air Ambulance attended and found Imaani lying on the ground in the children's playground, about 20 metres from the scene of the shooting. He was unconscious but breathing. Despite the best efforts of the emergency services, Imaani was pronounced dead just before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, about 30 minutes after he'd been shot. A post-mortem examination revealed he had 4 bullet wounds to his body. Officers searched the area of the shooting and found 14 bullet casings, as well as an iPhone, 2 Nokia mobile phones, and a snapped SIM card. The phones and the SIM belonged to Kyriakou and formed part of the stolen property during the earlier robbery. A black BMW was also recovered by police at the scene, which was the same one used by the suspects in the earlier robbery. However, detectives established Imaani was not involved in the robbery of Kyriakou. Tragically, he had arrived at the location where the stolen property was located moments before Kyriakou and Rees appeared. When Rees opened fire, Imaani was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The court heard that while it was Rees who discharged the firearm and took Imaani's life, The other defendants were all jointly responsible for his death because, in their different ways, they knowingly assisted and encouraged the commission of the offence. Detectives from the Met Specialist Crime Command launched a murder investigation after Imaani's death and were able to prove the defendant's involvement by piecing together CCTV, mobile phone data, and ANPR analysis and speaking to a number of people who witnessed the shocking attack. Kiriakou, Rees, Hardy and Dredge were all arrested in July 2020, shortly after the murder, while Nicholson was arrested in February 2021. As I said, they were all charged with murder and they were convicted, as I've stated previously. At the time, Detective Chief Inspector Neil John from the Met Specialist Crime Command said Imaani was a young man who had his whole life ahead of him and he was tragically killed in a horrific act of violence that took place in broad daylight, just meters away from a children's playground and a football pitch which was full of children. So the mother of Imaani actually criticised the coverage of her son's death, saying the media circus played up stereotypes and gave up false perceptions of the circumstances surrounding his killing. She said he wasn't on trial, but it almost seems like he was. She told a media outlet, "It was a children's park, it was a sunny day. Imaani had just turned up, he was totally oblivious, he didn't even know these men." In a statement read to the court during the sentencing, Imaani's mother said, "The pain we feel is unimaginable, and no amount of words in this world could describe it. Imaani was the glue to our family and loved by so many. The whole family are so damaged by Imaani's death. A mother should never have to bury their son. I carry so much emotions, I didn't even think this was possible to feel. Even smiling and just to breathe hurts most days. July the 4th will haunt me for the rest of my life. I try my hardest not to revisit that day, but every time I close my eyes, all I see is my son's lifeless body covered in blood, being worked on by the emergency services. I was unable to hold him or comfort him as he took his last breath. The worst pain I have ever had to endure was not being able to kiss him, hold his hand, or assure him I was there. The nature of my son's murder feels 100 times worse because he was an innocent young man who went to Westbourne Estate with no knowledge of the robbery that had taken place and what was going to happen to him. It kills me to think how scared Imaani was when he saw the defendants appear with a gun and then shoot him. Imaani will forever be missed, loved and remembered, and our hearts will be forever broken until we are back with our precious Imaani." The mother also said, "I want Imaani to be remembered as the funny, lovely, family-oriented person that he was. The joker full of charisma, adding, ultimately he just loved his family and we will never forget him. I will speak his name every day until the day I die." So guys, that's a new story coming in. Just want to say rest in peace, Imaani, and my condolences go out to your family. It's your boy GC. Keep it locked, keep it real.